The security footage didn't show her face at first. It showed the road. Wet. Slick. Empty. Then a pair of headlights sliced through the frame like a blade. Too fast. Too close to the center line. The tape jumped, and suddenly everything was chaos: metal, glass, a car spinning, a body thrown forward, a scream that never quite made it through the microphone. Someone pressed pause on the still image. A crushed compact car. Steam. Shattered windshield. And then, under the cold light of the courtroom projector, the prosecutor said the words the internet already knew by heart: "This is the night Lydia Harrow ran that red light." They didn't call her what everyone else did. They didn't say, "the congressman's daughter." Not yet. Not here. But the gallery didn't need the reminder. They saw it in the way she sat. In the way the lawyers dressed. In the way the cameras leaned in just a little closer than they did for anyone else. They knew. Everyone knew. Who her father was. And who she thought she was. That belief, that the rules bent for her, was what had brought her here. What no one expected was how violently it would break. Not on the street. In this room. Under the eye of Judge Joseph Wapner. Lydia Harrow looked out of place and completely at home at the same time. She was in her late 20s. Perfectly put together. Too put together for a courtroom that smelled of dust, paper, and old air. Blonde hair that had seen expensive hands. Straight, glossy, tamed into a low twist that tried to say, respectable, but still screamed, PR team. High cheekbones brushed with careful makeup. Eyes lined just enough to look intense on camera, not enough to look theatrical. Her suit was immaculate. Deep navy. Fitted. The jacket was cinched at the waist, the skirt precisely tailored to the knee. A silk blouse, ivory, soft, understated, peeked from beneath. On her wrist, a thin watch glittered, the kind of item you couldn't buy in a mall. Her posture was rigid. Arms crossed. Jaw tight. Every movement was clipped, controlled. But her eyes. Her eyes betrayed her. Anger. Barely contained. Like a pilot flame burning behind cool glass. She didn't look at the prosecution. She didn't look at the victim's family in the second row, fingers braided together so tight their knuckles were chalk white. She looked at the cameras. Always. Measuring. Calculating. She knew she wasn't just on trial. She was on television. On phones. On comment sections. The hashtag with her name and the word privilege had already trended twice. Her father, Congressman Daniel Harrow, sat a few rows behind. Dark suit. Flag pin on his lapel. Face carved from stone. He had spent a career perfecting that look, stern, principled, resolute. Today, it looked thinner. Like a mask stretched too tight over something brittle. He kept his hands folded, knuckles pressed against his lips, eyes on his daughter. He had fought wars in legislative chambers, moved bills, cut deals, dodged scandals. Always for other people. This one was different. This one had his last name written on every piece of paper. And for the first time, he wouldn't be the one speaking. He wouldn't be the one in charge. That power, in this room, belonged to someone else. Judge Joseph Wapner entered. All rise. Everyone stood. Including Lydia. She did it a fraction after everyone else. Not defiant. Not lazy. Calculated. Like she was letting everyone know she was doing this because she chose to. Not because she had to. She still believed in choice. She didn't understand yet that, at some point, choices had turned into consequences. And that, in this room, consequences spoke louder. The charges were clear. Reckless driving. Driving under the influence. Leaving the scene. A man in his 50s, a school custodian named Thomas Beck, had been trapped in his car. Spine fractured. 2 surgeries. Months of rehab. He walked now with a cane. Slowly. Carefully. On the playback, you could see the moment Lydia's black SUV plowed into him as he crossed the intersection on a green. You couldn't see her face. Not yet. But you could hear her voice from the responding officer's body cams. I didn't see him. This is ridiculous. Do you know who my father is? That line, the one people like her always seem to reach for, echoed in the silent courtroom like a confession. Not of the crash. Of the mindset. She had refused a breathalyzer at first. Insisted on calling her attorney. Name dropped. Everything was an accident. Overreaction. Stress. When they finally tested her, she was over the legal limit. Not by a little. By enough. Enough that, if she'd been anyone else, there would have been no question. Jail. Charge. Court. But she wasn't anyone else. And evidence had a hard time climbing the stairs of power. Until a camera caught something else. Not just the crash. The aftermath. Her walking away from the scene. Leaving the other car behind. The man inside half-conscious, slumped, bleeding. She walked toward a waiting sedan, opened the back door, and slid in. No rush. No panic. No looking back. The sedan drove off. Someone in the crowd had filmed it. Posted it. And suddenly, what could have been a quiet settlement became something else. A story. An outrage. A case. One that even her father couldn't swallow, silence, or smother. Not anymore. Not with the whole country watching. Not with the whole internet replaying her words. Do you know who my father is? From the moment the first witness was called, Lydia's toxicity seeped into the room. She was composed, but the edges of that composure were sharp. Every time the prosecutor used the word defendant, her jaw clenched. Every time the victim's injuries were mentioned, she shifted, legs crossing and uncrossing, like the conversation bored her. When Thomas Beck hobbled to the stand, cane clicking softly against the floor, she didn't look at him. She studied a spot on the table. Sometimes she looked up at the judge with an expression she might have used on a misbehaving staffer. Are we done yet? Thomas spoke quietly. He didn't dramatize. Didn't cry. He talked about seeing the light change. About the blur of headlights. About waking up to pain. He talked about losing his job because the school couldn't wait 6 months for him to come back. About the medical debts. About learning to walk again while watching clips of his own broken body on the news, looped between talking heads arguing about privilege. Lydia's eyes wandered. At one point, while he described trying to stand for the first time after surgery, she glanced at the clock. The prosecutor saw it. The cameras saw. The judge saw. Judge Wapner sat still, hands folded, listening. He always listened. That was his power. Patience. Attention. The things people like Lydia never truly had, because they never had to. Her attorney tried to keep her expression neutral. He'd seen it before. The way certain clients make their own cases worse just by being themselves. He'd warned her. Don't react. Don't roll your eyes. Don't talk back. She'd nodded. Then ignored him, the way she'd ignored so many polite warnings in her life. Because warnings had never come with teeth. Not for her. Not yet. The prosecutor played the body cam clips. Wobbly footage. Flashing lights. Officers approaching Lydia's SUV. The door opens. Her face appears. Eyes glassy. Speech deliberate, slow. Not slurred. Controlled. Calculated. The kind of slow someone uses when they're trying very hard to sound sober. "I'm fine," she says in the footage. "He came out of nowhere. I have nothing to drink." There's a faint trace of alcohol on the air according to the officer's notes. She leans forward. Aggressive. "This is ridiculous. I need to call my father. Congressman Harrow. Do you know him?" The officer continues with protocol. She scoffs. "This is a waste of time. People are watching. I can't be seen like this." On the tape, she doesn't once say, "Is the other driver okay?" Not once. In a room where every eye is fixed on her, replaying those words, she shifts in her seat, a small scoff escaping her lips. Unbelievable. That's what her face says. Unbelievable that this is being taken seriously. Unbelievable that she is sitting here, replaying a night she had already decided the world should move on from. Judge Wapner's gaze flicks to her. He notices the scoff. He notices everything. When it was the defense's turn, the strategy was clear. Reframe. Soften. Divert. Her lawyer rose with a carefully cultivated air of calm. He talked about pressure. Stalkers. Online threats. The unique vulnerabilities of being a public figure's child. He painted her not as a predator, but as a hunted animal. Skittish. Defensive. Living under constant scrutiny. He emphasized her volunteer work. Her charity posts. The staged pictures at food banks and fundraisers. He told the court about the night. About 2 glasses of wine over several hours. About disorientation after the crash. About panic and trauma responses. Everything had an explanation. Everything had a potential spin. She didn't leave the scene. She sought safety. She didn't know how bad the other driver was. She thought he was okay. She was dazed. Confused. Frightened. At no point did she intend harm. The words were smooth. Soft. Cushioning. The kind that play well in statements read from neat cards outside courthouse doors. They didn't quite land the same way under fluorescent lights with the victim sitting 20 feet away. Still, Lydia embraced the script. When she finally took the stand, she wore the face she thought the room wanted. The hurt one. The fragile one. She brushed back a strand of hair with trembling fingers. She swallowed hard before each answer. She filled the air with words like terrified, sorry, afraid. She said the crash replayed in her mind every night. She talked about never wanting to hurt anyone. She talked about pressure. Always pressure. Living with security details your whole life. Growing up in headlines. She talked about expecting the officer to recognize the threat around her, not her name as a threat. She tried to make this about danger. But only the kind that ever pointed at her. Not the kind she'd become. The one barreling through an intersection in an intoxicated, entitled haze. The one who believed that leaving a broken man behind in a broken car was seeking safety. The gallery shifted uneasily. Some looked disgusted. Some looked tired. As if they had heard this tone from people like her too many times before. The tone that turned personal disaster into an unfortunate misunderstanding. Judge Wapner let her talk. He gave her the space. Let her script lay itself out fully. You can't tear down a defense until it's finished building itself. Then you pull at the foundations. And it all comes down. "Ms. Harrow," he said, after her attorney finished his gentle questioning, "we've heard a lot about how that night affected you." His voice was even. Measured. No anger. No sarcasm. That was never his style. He didn't need it. "But I want to start somewhere simpler," he continued. With something that's not about fear or trauma or publicity. Just a decision. He picked up a transcript. "This is the body cam recording of your arrest," he said. "In it, you say to the officer, and I quote, 'Do you know who my father is?' Do you recall saying that?" Her cheeks flushed. Slightly. She tried to keep her voice steady. I was scared," she said. "I didn't know what was happening." He raised a hand. "I didn't ask how you felt," he said. "I asked if you said it." She swallowed. "Yes. You grew up," he said, "in a house that taught you those words mean something. That they open doors. Stop questions. Change outcomes." She bristled. "My father never," he cut in. "This isn't about what he did or didn't do," he said calmly. "This is about what you did. In that moment, you reached for your last name as a shield. Not because you were confused. Because you expected it to work." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the witness stand. Under the varnished wood, her knuckles went white. The camera zoomed slightly. The gallery leaned in. He wasn't raising his voice, but he was turning up the heat. "Do you know what else you did not say in that moment?" he asked. She didn't answer. He did. "You did not say, 'Is the other driver okay?'" His words cut the air. "This entire recording," he continued, "from first contact to transport, there is not one instance of you asking about Mr. Beck's condition." He glanced at Thomas. He sat stiffly, cane propped against the bench, eyes locked on the floor. "You were in enough possession of your faculties," the judge went on, "to argue, to name drop, to demand. You remembered your father's title. But not the man bleeding in the car you hit." Lydia's lips parted. Her lawyer shifted, half rising as if to object, then sinking back when he realized there was nothing to object to. It was all there. On tape. Undeniable. The judge's tone remained level. Clinical. That made it worse. If he'd shouted, she could have written him off as biased, emotional. He was just stating facts. And it was killing her image. Piece by piece. He picked up a medical report. "Mr. Beck's spine," he said, "was fractured in 2 places. He underwent 2 surgeries. He lost his job. He walks with a cane now. Pain is a constant in his life." He looked back at her. "You left him," he said. Her eyes flashed. Defensive. "I panicked," she snapped, the polished veneer cracking. "People were filming me. Crowding me. I didn't feel safe. I didn't know how bad it was." People were filming you," he repeated calmly. "That is what frightened you. Not the injury you just caused." "I was in shock," she shot back. Her voice rose. "Shock looks many ways," he replied. "In your case, it looked like calculation. You got into another car. You left. You did not stumble blindly away. You chose to leave." She bit her lip. Hard. "I made a mistake," she said. "A terrible mistake." "No," he said. "You made a series of choices." He ticked them off, one by one, like an indictment of character more than action. "You chose to drink," he said. "You chose to drive. You chose to speed through a red light. You chose, after impact, to focus on your reputation instead of the man you'd hit. You chose to invoke your father when you thought it would help. And you chose, afterwards, to publicly portray yourself as primarily a victim of online abuse." He lifted a printout of her social media post. The one that had poured gasoline on the fire. The one her team probably wished he'd never seen. The caption read, "When you're hunted because of your last name, they will use anything to destroy you. I am human. I made a mistake. Stop pretending you never have." Thousands of comments. Some supportive. Many furious. She had never once, in that post, named Thomas. Never once mentioned his injuries. Never once acknowledged the details. Just mistake. Just hate. Just me. Do you know what I don't see in this entire post? He asked. She stared at the paper. Jaw tight. His name, he said. The name of the man whose life changed because of your choices. In your narrative, he disappears. You become the focus. Again. Her voice dropped to a low, angry hiss. This is a witch hunt, she muttered. People always come for us. If my dad sold insurance, we wouldn't even be here. There it was. The explosion. Not of tears. Of rage. It came sudden, like a crack in glass that had been waiting days to spread. Her lawyer's hand flew to her arm, squeezing. Miss Harrow, he whispered through clenched teeth. She yanked her arm away. No, she snapped, louder now, eyes flashing fire at the judge. You're making this about something it's not. You're making an example out of me because of who my father is. This is political. This is, enough. The word wasn't loud. But it was final. It cut her off mid-syllable. The courtroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pen drop. Judge Wapner never leaned back. He leaned in. Not much. Just enough to change the air pressure in the room. Miss Harrow, he said, voice low and razor-sharp, for someone who insists she is not asking for special treatment because of who her father is, you certainly have no problem accusing this court of bias when it does not bend to you. She opened her mouth. His gaze stopped her. You are not on a talk show, he said. This is not a campaign debate. You do not get to pivot out of responsibility by crying politics in a courtroom where a man's broken body is the only reason we're here. Her chest rose and fell. Fast. Angry. She was used to controlling conversations. To turning tone into weapon. Here, every word she fired was being picked up, turned over, and held up to the light. And it wasn't flattering. In the second row, Congressman Harrow stared straight ahead, face carved in granite. His hand, though, shook. Just once. A tiny tremor in the knuckles. He had coached her his whole life on how to speak. How to dodge. How to reframe. He was watching those tools fail her now. Not because they were wrong. Because they didn't apply. Because this wasn't their world. Because in this small, wooden room, for this stretch of time, power had traded hands. And his name meant less than the name on the charge sheet. Congressman's daughter meant nothing next to defendant. He swallowed. Hard. For the first time, he looked old. Not on camera. In real life. Judge Wapner turned a page. I am not making an example of you because of who your father is, he said. I am holding you to account despite who your father is. He let that sink in. You believe, he continued, that you are being persecuted. That you are the victim of some vendetta against a political family. He met her eyes. In reality, he said, you are being treated the way countless defendants are treated when they drink, drive, injure someone, and flee. The only difference is that millions of people got to see you do it. He gestured toward the monitors. Not because of me, he said. Because of you. Because you live your life in a world where every stranger has a camera. And you still believed you could behave like no one was watching. He paused. Someone was, he added. And they sent it here. The video had broken through layers of insulation, staff, connections, lawyers, like a bullet through silk. It had pierced the bubble of assumption that had surrounded Lydia all her life. Out there, maybe, everything could be debated. Framed. Spun. In here, Nothing could be waved away with a witch hunt and a well-practiced scowl. In here, things were simpler. And so much harder. Whether your father is a congressman or a cashier does not change the force of impact between your SUV and Mr. Beck's car, Wapner said. It does not change the BAC in your blood. It does not change footage of you leaving the scene. He leaned back now. Just slightly. The tension in the room didn't ease. It sharpened. Today, he said, you will learn something that people with far less than you learned far earlier, that some rooms are immune to your excuses. Sentencing time. The air thickened. Even the scrape of a shoe sounded too loud. Lydia's rage simmered just beneath her skin. Her lawyer whispered rapidly, urging her to stay quiet, to let him handle it. Her father stared at a fixed point on the wall, jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. Thomas Beck kept his eyes on his hands. He didn't want to see her face when the sentence came. He didn't want her expressions, whatever they were, taking up space in his memory. He had enough noise in his head already. I have considered the evidence, Judge Wapner began. The footage, the testimony, the physical harm done. He glanced briefly at Thomas. I have also considered, he went on, your behavior before, during, and after the incident. He looked at Lydia. She held his gaze. Defiant. Almost daring him. She still believed she might bluff her way out of this. She still believed, deep down, that her father's presence in the room formed an invisible shield. That this was theater, after which some accommodation would be made. But there is something else, he said. Something that has weighed heavily in this court's view. He tapped the social media printout again. Your public statements. He held it up. This, he said, is not an apology. It is a piece of image management. It centers you. It casts you as hunted. It reduces a man's shattered body to a mistake and global outrage to hate. It shows me that, up until this moment, you have seen yourself as the primary injured party in all of this. He let the paper fall. In this courtroom, he said, that delusion ends. Her face tightened. She looked like someone who had been slapped. Not physically. Inside. I am going to say this as plainly as I can, he went on. You are not the victim here. You are the cause. Mr. Beck is the victim. The nurses who lifted him. The family members who watched him scream in pain. The co-workers who had to fill his shift. They are the casualties. You are the perpetrator. The gallery held its breath. It wasn't a revelation. It was alignment. Someone finally saying, out loud, what reality had been screaming for months. That difference matters, he said. Legally. Morally. Psychologically. He drew in a slow breath. This court sentences you, he said, to a term of incarceration in county custody. The words landed like a hard object on a wooden table. Solid. Irrefutable. Not fines. Not community service. Jail. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted in disbelief. You can't, she blurted. He didn't look away. I can, he said. And I am. Her lawyer squeezed her arm. Stop, he whispered. She didn't hear. Or refused to. You're ruining my life, she shouted. The words exploded out of her chest, years of entitlement compressed into a single, piercing note of outrage. There it was. The purest expression of the thing that had driven every bad choice she'd made. My life. My name. My story. Always, always, my. Judge Wapner's response was almost gentle. Ms. Harrow, he said, you ruined someone else's life the moment you chose to drink and drive through that intersection. Silence. Absolute. Her father closed his eyes. Finally. His shoulders slumped. The weight he'd been trying to hold up with posture alone crashed down on him. He looked, for just an instant, like any other parent in that courtroom. Not a congressman. Just a man. Watching his child be handed the consequences he'd spent a lifetime cushioning her from. The judge continued. In addition to incarceration, he said, you will have your driver's license revoked for a substantial period. You will complete mandatory substance abuse counseling. You will participate in victim impact panels, where you will listen, not speak, as others who have lost loved ones to drunk driving tell their stories. He never raised his tone. But bit by bit, he was stripping away every bit of control she thought she had. You will not, he added, post about this case on social media while you are under supervision. Any attempt to cast yourself publicly as the victim of this process will be treated as a violation of the spirit of this sentence, and this court will take that very seriously. That condition hit her almost as hard as the jail time. Her world lived online. Her power. Her ability to spin, to gather sympathy, to rally defenders. He was cutting that line. At least for a while. Leaving her to sit, for once, without the narcotic of attention to numb her discomfort. You said earlier, he reminded her, that if your father sold insurance, we wouldn't be here. He looked straight at her. As far as this court is concerned, he said, your father could be anyone. Because in this courtroom, you are not a congressman's daughter. You are just another person who thought her last name could outrun the law. He paused. It felt like the entire room leaned, unconsciously, closer. For the record, he finished, it did not. The bailiff stepped forward. Time to move. The cuffs felt like an insult to her. A symbol she believed only belonged on other people. She yanked reflexively when the metal circled her wrists. Not hard enough to pull away. Just enough to say, I don't accept this. The steel didn't care. It closed all the same. Cold. Definite. The cameras zoomed. They captured every frame. The disbelief. The fury. The tiny tremor in her chin. The moment she glanced back, just once, toward the gallery, toward the familiar frame of her father. Their eyes met. All the speeches he'd written. All the negotiations he'd mastered. All the power he'd wielded. None of it could cross that distance. He gave a tiny nod. Not approval. Resignation. Acknowledgement. That this, finally, was out of his hands. The guards led her toward the side door. She walked fast. Too fast. Like someone trying to outpace what was already behind her, climbing up her spine. It followed anyway. The sentence. The shame. The clipped court video that would, by the end of the week, be chopped, captioned, replayed in millions of places. Congressman's daughter explodes in court. Judge shuts her down. She's not laughing now. The side door closed. Soft. Final. On the other side, she would finally discover something people without her last name know well, that in certain places, your anger doesn't move walls. It just echoes. Until it tires itself out. The gallery rose slowly. No cheers. No celebration. Just movement. Quiet. Columned. People filing out with mixed expressions. A young woman near the back wiped at her eyes. Not because she pitied Lydia. Because she had lost a cousin to a drunk driver whose case never went anywhere. Seeing even one person, even one privileged person, actually go to jail for it. It did something to the tight knot she'd carried in her chest for years. An older man shook his head as he walked past the bench. Not in disapproval. In disbelief that he had actually just seen it. On camera. Preserved. A judge telling a congressman's daughter, no. Not this time. Not here. Thomas Beck didn't move right away. He sat on the bench, staring at the space where she'd been standing minutes before. His cane lay across his knees. His hands rested on it. His breathing was slow, controlled. His pain wasn't gone. His back still ached. His finances were still ruined. But one thing was different now. On paper. In record. In the story that would follow this case around for years. He was not crazy. Not overreacting. He was the victim. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard it. The judge had said it. Out loud. That mattered. More than he'd expected. Judge Wapner gathered his paperwork. For him, this was one of many cases. One file among countless others. He didn't linger. He didn't look for cameras. He stood, gave the usual final instructions, and stepped away from the bench. Just before he disappeared through the door behind him, he glanced briefly toward the gallery. Toward Thomas. Toward Congressman Harrow, still sitting, hands folded, absorbing the wreckage that had finally made it into his world. He didn't nod. Didn't smile. Just looked. Steady. Present. Then he was gone. Leaving behind a room that, for a rare, narrow stretch of time, had functioned exactly as it was meant to. Not as a theater. Not as a battleground of parties. As a place where one truth outweighed one name. Where one man's broken back weighed more than one woman's outrage. Where a judge with nothing to lose by bending, chose not to. When the video hit the internet, the commentary exploded. Clips of Lydia shouting, "You're ruining my life," and Wapner replying, "You ruined someone else's life," played on loop. Tweets. Posts. Reels. Shorts. Everyone had a take. Some defended her. They always do. She's human. Everyone makes mistakes. If it wasn't recorded, no one would care. But the louder, more persistent voice hammered a different point. People with no money do time for this every day. She got what any of us would have gotten. That's the point. Judge didn't care who her father was. Respect. In a world where headlines about untouchable children of power had become too common, this story sliced differently. Not because it fixed everything. It didn't. Not because it proved the system was always fair. It wasn't. But because, in this one instance, on one afternoon, in one courtroom, captured from multiple angles, privilege slipped. Entitlement fractured. And the law, flawed, human, imperfect, still managed to land where it needed to. Squarely. On the person who had tried so hard to step outside of it. For all the drama, all the shouting, all the sanitized press releases that would surely follow. The image that stuck was simple. A pair of handcuffs closing around wrists that had believed they were immune. And the calm voice of Joseph Wapner reminding everyone watching, inside and out, in here, you don't get sentenced by your last name. You get sentenced by what you did.